your Son, Jesus Christ, and we thank you that you defeat our enemies.
Had to get it right.
Remember that
Capital, so I didn't have to
David
park.
went against Goliath. He didn't do it he did it because he trusted you. It feels like a David moment right now. So we thank you that you are the one going before us. You are behind us. You are above us. You are to our right. You are to our left. You are in our hearts. You are in our minds. And you are with us all the way. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, I know. Let's go see the flag. All right. So the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic in which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
Kelly, thank you so much. And just so I don't avoid interference with the speakers, I'll stand back here. I want to just give a quick background for why we are here today and how this event came about. And I think that's very important, because if you have followed my work at Glenn Morgan and WeTheGovern.com, I'm a pretty public guy. I have been writing articles for many years now. And I've also been doing events here. In fact, I think the first event I remember ever organizing here was at this exact location in 2003. And I remember I organized a running race called Run 'em Out of Government. Unfortunately, people didn't take that message to heart, and we're in the position where we have today. But the thing is, I don't tend to organize a lot of rallies. I speak at a lot of rallies. I'm obviously an activist. I'm a journalist. I like to expose corruption in government, of which there's an unlimited supply. But I generally don't organize rallies. And the reason why I did this, and the reason why we organized this to commit an act of free speech, apparently a radical event in Washington State lately, was because on January 10th, behind me, on the other side of the statue, I came here to an event organized by Jessica Carricker out of Ellensburg. And it was just a classic event that they were organizing. And she told me that she had been threatened with both arrest and citation and all kinds of other harassment that I've actually not seen on this campus before. And it was because that she wanted to have speakers like this on the ground, a generator just like that over there, and wires on the ground. And that was the explicit, specific thing that they said you couldn't have. And then after that, Doug Basler, who's truly provided me the evidence I needed to run today's event, is over there. Doug had come out and actually also tried to commit an act of free speech right over here, and was also threatened with it. And what Doug was able to do is send me some video that he actually had of them saying it, and saying that they would cite him and that they would arrest him, that he couldn't have a speaker, that he couldn't have a generator or wires on the ground, and that if you had a permit you could do that, but they weren't issuing any permits. Now, if anybody's paid any attention to the First Amendment at all in the last 70 years, which means that you don't work for the Attorney General's office, then you would know that there's actually there's actually an endless supply of cases in federal court that actually explicitly say that you cannot use the issuance of a permit to suppress somebody's free speech. Period. It is not even ambiguous, except for the Attorney General's office. And so when that came out, we decided that we had to commit an act of free speech. Because, and I watched the pro-life group over here. I saw a video of them being stuck trying to hold the speakers on their lap. I mean, it was just these absurd hurdles to go through just to commit an act of free speech. And so that was why I wanted to organize this event. And I wanted to make it a very clear event for free speech. It's everybody here, I'm speaking, I'm committing free speech. You are all exercising your First Amendment rights because we also have the right to free assembly. Part of what we plan to be talking about here today is to petition our government for a redress of grievances, which is also quite clearly part of free speech. And as you see, multiple people with cameras here are exercising their right to free press. And as you heard earlier, we committed a great and brave act of committing a freedom of religion here. And so in my book, and according to every attorney I talked to, that was pretty much the perfect setup for the state if they were going to choose to arrest us and actually go through with the threats that they have given to a variety of groups over the last couple weeks. And I am happy to tell you that when I spoke, and again, we weren't trying to hide. I wrote an article explaining exactly what we would do here, explaining the state constitution, which is even more aggressive when it comes to our rights and freedoms. Article 1, Section 1, 4, and 5 very specifically apply to this, but also the list of all, just a handful of this federal court cases, and then the explicit misuse of the rules that were being quoted to everybody as to say why you couldn't have speakers or a microphone or wires. And to their credit, and I think it's important that we recognize this, in a conversation that I had with the people who manage the campus here, Enterprise Services, including Tommy, who I'd actually specifically profiled in my video, as well as some of the state patrolmen, they said that they were going to suspend those rules, not just because I was happy to be arrested and go write letters from a Thurston County jail, but also because they recognized that the information that we provided to them clearly had merit, and that there was a possible misuse of the rules in Washington State to suppress our free speech rights. And so I do want to point out that they do recognize it's not just because Glenn's a scary guy, and I had so many eager attorneys willing to jump on this case, but it was because they're going to suspend these rules for everybody moving forward, at least for the length of the pandemic. So, the point of that isn't about me. I'm not an important guy. I'm no smarter than anybody else and no braver than anybody else necessarily. There's plenty of people who are brave and smarter than I am. But when it comes to exercising our rights, that's the point. You have to exercise them. Our rights are not just gifted to us in the bloodstream, I think, as Reagan famously was quoted. And they don't just pass down through osmosis generation to generation just because we have a document that was written, several hundred years ago. You have to exercise your rights in order to maintain them, even as something as fundamental as free speech. And sometimes we have to go back to basics. And I don't think that it's a nefarious plot that bureaucrats in Olympia were trying to actively suppress us, but I do believe it doesn't matter whether it's a nefarious plot, it doesn't matter whether it's bad acting, it doesn't matter whether it's just the typical bloat of government and their inevitable incompetence the bigger they get. Whatever it is, we still have to step up and exercise our right to assemble, our free speech, and we have to push back when we see our rights being abused. It requires us to push back. And the future inevitably belongs to those who show up. And that is a truism. I say it at the end of every video I make. I know I'm not the first person to say it, even though Todd Herman has always said that I am, but I'm sure there's other people that have said that before. But the point is, you do not get your rights just given to you. You have to exercise them. You have to stand up for them. You have to be willing to confront them. Preferably not in a foolish, unthoughtful, unplanned way, but in a methodical and careful way. We have for too long outsourced our freedom to other organizations and politicians and agencies and other groups, assuming that somehow those people are going to protect our rights. And that is a big mistake. And we've gotten lazy because we believe that there's groups like the ACLU, for example. We assume that because they had a bunch of litigation 50 years ago, long before I was born, and that there was a time when they cared about free speech. But groups like that have long lost their way, and now they've just become boutique leftist little organizations that really care not at all whether you and I have free speech anymore. And in fact, they seem to support censorship. And we have gotten to the point where we have this assumption that because somebody's been elected office, that they're going to do the right thing. No, that's not true at all. And just because you have agencies and bureaucrats who claim that they're going to enforce civil rights, that is completely wrong. You can look at some of the stuff that's been going on where they clearly are not enforcing anything related to our rights or our freedoms, and in fact have become agents of suppression and pushing back on that. And that's part of that's the inevitable nature, the bloat of bureaucracy, and part of that's the corruption, I think, that inevitably comes the bigger government gets, and part of that's our fault. Because out of apathy and generations of probably really poor education, we've gotten to the point where people need to wake up and we need to start pushing back and restoring the freedoms that we have, but we must exercise in order to maintain. And so I think that that's an important part. That's really why we're here today. My goal being here was not to have you stand out in the rain for many hours, but it is to make sure First, it was to see if they were willing to arrest me for doing this, and then if they weren't, to actually petition our government for the redress of grievances. So before I hand this over to the next speaker, I just want to make sure that there are several grievances that I have with what's going on in Olympia. First, it was this issue today that they were threatening people to not be able to come up here and speak. Second is I would like to remove this gate and actually the fences and actually have access to the Capitol. That is an absurd and ridiculous political theater that was put on by our politicians and bureaucrats, and it's totally unnecessary. The very same people who tell us a wall doesn't work on the southern border are telling us that this is very important for their own protection. So that's number one. Number two, this lockdown legislature that we have right now has specifically been structured in a way to deny our ability to communicate with our legislators in any effective, meaningful way to talk about the bills, some of the terrible bills that are being proposed in the legislature. And it's because this Zoom communication process gives, Senator Sam Hunt from representing this district where we're standing right now, his little fat finger there, right? He's hitting everybody on mute and making sure you don't even have an opportunity to speak in committee. That is a much more difficult thing for him to do when you're actually in person testifying on these bills. And if there's a grievance that I have, it's the denial of the citizens' right to be able to petition their legislators in a legislative session. We're right in the middle of a session, not that you would know it. And we need to have that right restored. I think it's absurd. There's not even a quorum on campus. I think any bill they pass in this legislative session is questionable in its constitutionality. The Constitution is very clear about a quorum being needed on campus. And so instead, all these legislators, we don't know who's behind the camera screen when they're voting on these bills. We don't know who's holding up notes for them to read from, and you can see that many of them, some of them are quite marginally literate when it comes to actually speaking in public anyway. But somebody's holding up a script and they're reading it right there as they're going along. We'd like to know which special interest is putting words in their mouth and giving them the script to say during these sessions. I'd like to know. And so I think that that's really the next biggest grievance that I have about what's going on here in Olympia. So before I just hand this off to the next speaker, again, I'm fully aware that you're enjoying the liquid sunshine in Washington just as much as I am. But I want to let you know that I'm imagining there's going to be some other grievances coming up here as well. And I also want to introduce this next person because this next person is somebody who I think has been persecuted more than anybody in the history of the state of Washington as a political activist. 8 years of litigation by the Attorney General's office, an active effort to completely destroy his life in every measurable way, and the great crime that he committed, and if you're a bureaucrat, this is a great crime. By his actions, he has saved taxpayers over $40 billion that you would otherwise have squandered down some imaginary, goofball idea, whatever that is. I mean, if you don't believe the state squanders your money in a frivolous way, well, number one, you're not paying attention. But just for example, that building right up there, the Employment Security Department, in their infinite wisdom, they decided to give away $600 million, supposedly to a Nigerian fraud scheme. Now, we don't know where it really went because they've actively suppressed any kind of investigation into exactly which internal employees turned off the security controls, and they actively, has come out recently with whistleblowers, told employees there to personally deny people their checks in a hostile activity purposely to make life as miserable as possible. Well, the Biden administration saw that Susie Levine, the former director of that agency, was that qualified her to get out of the JV squad and move on up to pro and go back to DC and show them how they, instead of just losing hundreds of millions of dollars, we can lose billions and maybe trillions and get away with it. And apparently that's what qualifies in the Biden administration. Now, their loss, our gain, we at least lose another corrupt bureaucrat in Washington. But we have a lot we can talk about. I don't mean to get to everybody, and I'm sorry about that. So the next speaker is the person who I think has been persecuted more than anybody else in the state of Washington. The Attorney General's dedicated his life. Well, he ignores the landfill and toxic waste dump that's occurring on the other side of the Capitol Lake right now. He ignores violence in our streets. He ignores violence at the hotels down here when they seize them and Antifa attacks people. He ignores all that, but by God, he has gone after Tim Eyman more than anybody else I've ever seen and more than anybody else in the history of the state of Washington, and yet for the great crime of reducing how much taxes we pay. So for that, Tim, I want you to come on up with that setup and have you share your words of wisdom and commit an act of free speech today.
thanks very much. Let's hear it for Glenn Morgan. One of the things that he did, which I can't stand when he does this stuff, is that he says, I'm not important, I'm no big deal. Glenn Morgan is a huge deal, and we're so lucky to have him on our team. I had the great honor of doing a traveling road tour about a year or two ago, and we called it the, help me out, Full Contact Activism Tour that we did together. And we tag teamed it. We were speaking to various groups, and our goal was to try and inspire more people to get active and get politically active. And after about 8 stops and various speeches, we both realized that we were probably squelching an enormous amount of activism because we started talking about the kind of stuff that's happened to us. And we found it richly ironic that as we're telling stories about how we're being destroyed, and he has his own lawsuit that I'm going to talk about a little bit. But as all this stuff is happening, we're looking at all these people, and they kind of look white as a sheet and go, yeah, sounds like a great deal. Maybe we should do that too. Didn't inspire a lot with that. But it really was an amazing experience, and I had a chance to get to know Glenn. And the thing that I really admire about him is that he's a smart activist. He's not just a reckless activist. He thinks this stuff through. He understood the ramifications of what he was doing, no matter how provocative his posts were about how we were going to commit acts of free speech. He did his homework. He contacted attorneys. He had things lined up in the event that things went bad, but he didn't hide it from anybody. He shared it with the State Patrol. He shared it with the Inslee administration, with the Ferguson Attorney General's office, with all of them saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this, and I provoke you, and I invite you to arrest me if you think that I'm out of line. And I thought that smart approach is something that our side needs to learn more of, is that he knew he was on solid ground, but I know a lot of us feel like we're on solid ground, but he had the guts and the smarts to do it the right way, and he got them to back down before we even did it. So let's hear it for Glenn. Yeah, Glenn! I really admire Glenn. I just think we are so lucky to have him on our side. I don't know if many of you pick up his subtle humor that he uses quite often. One of my favorite stories that he talked about is that when he was in college, he would see that the other side was having a protest, where they were starving themselves, where they were on a fast, and he would have a barbecue right next to them at the same event in order to be able to illustrate the absurdity of the other side. And so there's something about Glenn, as with me, I think we're both acquired tastes, but I think that the humor is critical because we're in a pretty dark time right now. And if we can't use humor and a lot of dark humor, we're not going to make it through this thing. So let's hear it one more time for Glenn. Well, he did bring up my thing with the Attorney General, and I rarely have a chance to talk about it extensively because I'm usually doing something but on some kind of project. But, we're talking about First Amendment, so that's what I'm going to talk about today. This Wednesday, in Thurston County Superior Court, a judge is going to make a ruling. 8.5 years of my life has been devoted to this nonstop investigation, litigation, persecution against me, my family, my supporters, all the people that have helped me over the years, and it's reaching fruition where there will actually be a decision. And regardless of what that decision is, it's already a victory, because I don't believe that the Attorney General ever thought that I would make it that long. That at some point you would give up on me, or I would give up and break and basically move to Idaho and sell real estate for a living or do something and walk away from it. No way. And I think it's a combination of masochism, stupidity, stubbornness, and just a belief that if they take me out, that who's going to be next. And so 8.5 years. It's hard for me to believe that we're reaching the point where there will actually be a decision. And on Wednesday, between 1:30 and 3:30 in Thurston County Superior Court, the judge is going to issue his decision. During the trial, the state said they wanted to be reasonable as far as the penalties are concerned. So the penalty they want is a $7.6 million fine. So reasonable. So reasonable. Glad they held back. And a lifetime ban on all future political activity. So I'm glad they're being so reasonable and not pushing the envelope too far. And so Wednesday of next week, we find out the decision on it. And like I said, I feel it's already a victory that because of thousands of people throughout the state that have donated to my legal defense fund, I was able to survive this. But in the process, they literally took everything I have. It looks like we're going to lose our house because it's the only way to be able to pay the lawyers. But I am just so grateful that so many people have helped me reach this stage where I'm actually able to get some kind of decision. And it's an amazing thing, and I just want to say thank you, everybody, for that.
What are the charges? What are the actual charges?
The thing about this that is always difficult is that the state, throughout their investigation, realized that the process itself is the punishment. That they can mirror your hard drive. They can depose you. I've been deposed like 5 times. They deposed my wife. They deposed supporters that had helped me over the years. And they would subpoena people and ask them for the last 10 years of emails between Tim Eyman and you. And the message was pretty clear that if you help me, you will pay a price for it. So stop helping him. And what it did was I found that more and more people were willing to help me because they saw this abuse of power and they saw the injustice of it. And they say to themselves, no matter what he did, is this an appropriate penalty? To lose everything you've ever had, take away a guy's house, basically destroy his life because, as Glenn said, my original sin was being a conservative in the state of Washington and being effective at it. So the charges, I love the charges, allegations. For the last 8 years, for example, I asked people to help me and help me survive this thing. The Attorney General during the investigation found out that people were helping me. And they suddenly said that if Tim Eyman receives a check made payable to Tim Eyman or Tim Eyman Legal Defense Fund, that is a campaign contribution that needed to be reported.
That's sick.
Now, if you understand campaign finance law, you have to report all your contributions to a political campaign. And I'm not a political campaign. I am a person. I'm a human being. And so the state, in order to be able to bolster their argument that these are campaign contributions, came up with the novel theory that I am no longer a person. I am now a political action committee. Tim Eyman, personally, is a political action committee. It's the first time in human history a person would be considered a political action committee, but what does that mean? Normal human beings have no idea what that means. What's wrong with that? A political action committee has to report every dollar you receive and every dollar you spend, regardless of what it's for. So if I go to the grocery store, they think that that has to be on a campaign report. Money I spend on toilet paper, money I spend on car insurance, anything that I spend my money on has to go on a campaign report on a monthly basis. But it went further than that. If you're a political action committee, you can't use your campaign funds for personal use. So I would be prohibited from using my own money to spend money for me and my family to take care of them. How do you live like that? The point is you can't. It's simply impossible. So the very concept of how can Tim Eyman continue to exercise free speech, be active politically, and yet literally can't spend his own money to take care of himself is an absurd position. But he nonetheless, the AG said, Mr. Iman in the last 6 years has collected $766,000 in quote-unquote campaign contributions that he never reported. And this particular judge bought that line of crap and ended up ruling that way about 6 months ago. And so the headlines you read about Tim Iman taking campaign money for personal use, you have to ask yourself the question, is a check made payable to Tim Iman or Tim Iman Legal Defense Fund, is that a campaign contribution? Was it okay for him to use his own money to take care of himself? You're going to have to forgive me. It's hard not for me to talk about this because it's been such a central aspect of my life for 8.5 years, and to know that I'm on the verge of maybe this is the last act of free speech that I'm allowed to give, I'm going to take this moment and talk about it a little bit, because it's 8.5 years of anger and frustration that when you're represented by an attorney, you can't talk about it. The one aspect that also happened throughout this is that about 2 years ago, I had to file for bankruptcy because the amount of costs associated with this thing got so bad that I ended up going, I just can't keep up with this. That didn't stop the litigation. It kept going. And so they eventually, the Attorney General managed to bully my lawyer off the case. And I went to the judge and I said, Judge, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not an attorney. I can't possibly defend myself. I have no idea what I'm doing. I want to default. I want to give up. Let's just simply decide now how much the penalty is going to be, because I just can't defend myself. And this judge said, no, I'm not going to let you give up. You have to keep going. So I was forced to represent myself for about 9 months. Now, I went to Washington State University. Go Cougs! Great business education, but it doesn't teach you a lot about being in a courtroom. And so I ended up losing motion after motion after motion throughout this entire ordeal. During that 8 months, they just buried me, and I was literally not able to keep up with it. But eventually, former Justice Richard Sanders agreed to take my case. And he's been defending me for close to a year now, and he had to spend 8 months just getting through all the discovery requests that the state had hit me with. It literally cost $400,000 or $500,000 for him to do that, and I still owe him hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's what the only way I'm going to be able to pay him is for them to take my home as a result of it. And so I'm just enormously grateful for Richard that he didn't just walk away from the fight. He stuck with it and was willing to get me to the point where I actually get a decision on Wednesday. I went much longer than I expected to go today. I'm sorry about that, but I just want you to know that I am just so grateful to all of you for being with me throughout this entire fight. It's been 8.5 years. Let me let you know a little secret. Regardless of what the decision is, the Attorney General will find it inadequate and will end up appealing it. So this will go on for years longer. And so the thing that I'm most proud of throughout this entire 8 years during this thing as it's been going on is I think Ferguson wanted me at some point to just stop trying, just to give up. And the thing that made me so happy and proud is that I basically took the advice of Glenn Morgan and say, you need to become a super activist. You need to show that this has only inspired you to do more. So I've been doing initiatives, and you've been passing them. $30 tabs, anybody?
Yeah. 3 times we voted.
Admittedly, a very confusing initiative. Very, very confusing. 9 justices on the Supreme Court said it was too confusing for voters. I ran for governor. Probably wouldn't have run for governor if not for that lawsuit. That lawsuit inspired me to work even harder because I knew that Ferguson would want me to stop, to just slow down. And I wanted to kick it into overdrive and say, all you're doing is inspiring me to do even more. And so they're sending out attack dogs. God, the other side has learned a lot from history on what those dogs can do at free speech rallies. So anyway, I'll close with that. One more time, we would not be here today if not for Glenn Morgan. Let's hear it one more time for Glenn. We'll turn it over to everybody else again Wednesday. I just want to thank you all for your prayers, for all your support over the years. I know I would never have made it without any of you. I'm just incredibly grateful to all of you for helping me over the years, and I'm going to keep, as long as there's air in my lungs and energy in my muscles, I'm going to continue to be an activist in the state of Washington. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You can go to the hearing. It's going to be at Thurston County Courthouse, where the Constitution goes to die, and I would encourage you to go to the hearing. And I know I'll probably be there as well. I've been at a number of his hearings in the past. And one thing I want to point out in Tim's case that's kind of interesting, before I hand it off to the next person, we have campaign finance laws in Washington State. Campaign finance laws are written mainly to suppress your ability to participate in free speech. Everybody likes them because they like the idea of transparency in the political process. So do I. But what happens is they're primarily used to protect political insiders and to punish political newcomers. And the campaign finance laws in the state are written in a way that is pretty much impossible for most people to comply. And I discovered this myself, despite actually teaching classes on it for a while, in 2016. And when they filed a PDC complaint against me, Public Disclosure Commission, that's the agency that enforces it, I finally went and really did my homework on it, and I started filing PDC complaints myself on the other side, because I found out that on the conservative freedom side, we had just tried to hunker down and survive the assault of complaints or the process that the Attorney General had been using to harass people. And so proportionally, I filed 620 PDC complaints against the majority of the elected officials in the state, and the PACs and the unions and judges and all my friends on the other side. In fact, Senator Sam Hunt, who I mentioned earlier, who likes to mute people with testimony, he wrote a letter to the PDC and said, clearly Glenn Morgan's ignorant about the campaign finance laws in the state, after I filed the first complaint on him. And I thought, he's probably right. So I went and did my homework, and the next one caused the Attorney General. It triggered a litigation against Sam Hunt, and Senator Hunt had to pay a fine. Fortunately, after I got enough of the politicians to pay fines and forced the Attorney General to file 19 lawsuits against his friends, they decided that it was time to change the campaign finance laws in Washington State. So they put a bill in 2018 called the Stop Glenn Morgan Bill, and that's what it was nicknamed. I remember that. And so they had to change some of the rules. They're still not great, but they're a little less delusional than they were before. And so the heavy hand that has come down on Tim Eyman is going to be a little bit harder to apply to the next person, based on the changes that they made there. But that was a good example, actually. Good activism, exposing the truth. I still file complaints just for the fun of it. My fun, not so much for the people I file them on. But and it's the other side spent about $600,000 in payments and fines. I don't know how much in attorney fees. Nobody can figure that out. And the Attorney General and actually the PDC had to hire a lot more employees. So I accidentally grew government a little bit bigger than I had wanted to. And but nevertheless, I think that's just an example of activism. I want to talk about one more person who should come up and speak next. And Doug Basler, I know you're here. Now, as Doug's coming up here, if Doug had not recorded what the State Patrol and the Enterprise Services had said here, had not gotten the video to me, I don't think I would have organized this event today. And I want to tell you something about Doug Basler. One of the reasons why I love this guy is that I remember he got arrested for preaching the gospel down in downtown Portland in 1998, right? And what I love about it is they dragged him off the car, handcuffed him, and threw him in the squad car, and he fought it. And he went to court, and he prevailed. And immediately he left that courtroom and went right back down to Portland and started doing the exact same thing just a few minutes later on the same corner, same exact location. And I only say that because you shouldn't have to be arrested to practice our freedom and our free speech. You shouldn't have to. But you can't let that intimidate you. And you do the right thing. I mean, if they're going to arrest you, then go and deal with it and then come right back out. You do not let that intimidate you from being here and being in places like that. Yeah. And with that, I just want, Doug, I know you probably have a couple other things you want to say here, and but thank you so much for giving me the evidence and the motivation to get back out here.
All right. Wow, so I usually like to start with a joke, so I have a new one. What's the difference between a progressive and a U.S. savings bond? A U.S. savings bond eventually will mature and make money. Any rate, April 26th this year, a few weeks into the lockdown, they closed our churches. And I got up on April 26th, and I really heard the Lord say, you're going to have street church today. And I hadn't had street church for years. But I had a PA, a generator, a guitar, and a ton of attitude. And so I went down to Point Ruston in Tacoma, and we had church. And people were crying, and people were saying, we miss church, and we miss Jesus, and all this stuff. My mother-in-law is locked up in a rest home. They're killing her. They won't let her out. They won't let people in. We can't go see her. We got her out this week for a few days, and she's getting frail, and we're just like, Mr. Inslee, tear down this wall. I just been wanting to say that. Any rate, so we started doing street church. Immediately, the cops came and they started to harass us. And I went, my team's not ready. And so I found a group of, a list of court cases that support us in our free speech rights, which apply to freedom of religion, like Glenn said earlier, as well as the free speech stuff. So I started to just confront the cops and say, you're wrong, and we have the right to be here. And they said, oh, you have to have a permit. But I said, but you're not giving permits. And I showed them the court case, Sayah versus New York, 1952. Permits are not allowed by the U.S. Supreme Court to put a prior restraint on free speech. And pretty soon, I get a call from the Tacoma Police Department and says, anybody bothered to talk to you? I go, no. He goes, well, let's have a conversation. At the end of the conversation, he said, I am not enforcing park regulations over your First Amendment right. I don't care if you have a 100-piece rock band down there. And so when and Marty McClendon, you guys know Marty, we set up, and Carrie French, just the three of us, we set up a couple of speakers and a generator and a little pop-up right over there 3 weeks ago. Tommy Malas from Enterprise Services came over, and I said, nope, you're wrong. And I got my phone out and I started recording. We gotta be ready to go toe to toe. Then I said, well, look, if you're gonna threaten us with arrest, see, if they threaten you with arrest, you don't have to get arrested. You can sue them, and they cannot hide behind their office. If they violate your civil rights, they have no qualified immunity. They are personally responsible. And so then they said, well, you can go over there. So we went over there on the other side of that fountain and set everything up for our radio show, our table, our equipment, our microphones. We got everything set up, and they came and said, oh, no, this is private property. You can't do it here either. I'm like, you bastards. I mean that in the Christian way, okay? So I'm just saying, look, it's harassment. So I called Pacific Justice Institute, and they had already offered to defend us. And they were saying, we will come, we will defend you. And I said, okay, how much is this going to cost? They go, sir, we will charge you $1. So I want everybody to go to pji.org and give them money, because that's what they do. They defend us if we're willing to fight. As soon as I call them, they go, oh, we're so glad you called. We're very concerned about lack of access in Olympia. They immediately got happy. Write out a report, send them the videos. So they did the investigation. They came back and said the law against structures has to do with camping. And there's case law in Washington State that says you have to prove they're going to camp. Anybody want to camp under that speaker right there? Anybody been camping in Washington in the winter? I need more than that. I like my travel trailer. Thank you very much. So any rate, contacted Glenn. I think you put all of that list of rights are on wethegovern.com. Look, he's right. We have to fight now. So I hope, if you've got a PA, get it over here, put it on the ground. Let's keep going. They said they suspended this indefinitely, but if next week somebody comes down here and they pull the same crap on them, let us know. Get a hold of Glenn, get a hold of me or whatever, and we will immediately sue them. PJI is ready to sue them right now. Right now. So God bless you guys for coming out.
Wait a minute. On what grounds were they trying to deny it?
The specific grounds, that's a good question. So specifically, there were two whacks that they were using, and I have them on my website. I don't know if I have them totally memorized. I think it was WAC 200-220-235, right? And specifically, it had to do with camping. And there is federal case law that say you can't have camping overnight as part of a protest. And that's probably a good idea in this city, because if you look on the other side of the lake, they do like building big toxic waste campgrounds, and that it really looks more like a landfill over there, and that's probably closer to resembling that. And understandably, the people who manage the Capitol here would prefer not to have it look that way out here. So that's an understandable desire. What it was is it's being misused and misapplied. And the truth is, normally, it's been fairly easy. Going back 100 years, it's been generally pretty easy here to get a permit, because it was you just called up and said, hey, I want to do an event at the Capitol. And all the reason the permits primarily exist here, so that if there was already a group over there, they could just tell you that there's already a group there, why don't you move your event here, or on that lawn, or on that lawn, or on that lawn, They would just give different locations. But unique in state history, for the first time in our existence, Governor Inslee decided to shut down the entire state and declare a bizarre emergency that has never ended. Remember 2 weeks? And so it's never ended. And because of that, they were not allowing them to issue permits. And that's really where they got into this situation where it no longer made logical sense. Now, neither does much of bureaucracy. And a bureaucrat's rarely capable of thinking logically. They just simply go through whatever's, on their plate. And that was what they were doing it, and then they got away with it because the first people folded. And then it kind of, goes, and they just get used to misapplying the law. So again, our rights exist to the extent that we're willing to exercise them. They will not automatically exist otherwise. We have to be willing to exercise them. So I think that's important to remember. Now, I oftentimes have been focused on exposing corruption in government, and I say many times that there's a mountain of corruption concealed by an ocean of incompetence. That's how corruption exists in government. Incompetence is a feature, not a bug, of big government. And so it's something just always to remember. But not everybody in government is, always trying to be corrupt. There's a lot of good people there that come to me as whistleblowers. There's a lot of, in fact, almost every agency right now has somebody there that'll tell me some things that are going on internally. They know when things are wrong. They're willing to come forward. And the truth is, not everybody in elected office is terrible. Not every single person is incompetent or bad and destructive to our free speech rights, as somebody like, say, Senator Sam Hunt. And we do have some good people representing us in the legislature, people who are willing to stand up for our rights and for our freedoms, and who recognize and who voted against the rules that this legislature is operating under right now. And one of those people, I would like to have him come up here and speak to you briefly, is Representative Jim Walsh from the 19th Legislative District. Truly standing up for our freedoms every day in a legislature where freedoms are often ignored.
Thank you, Glenn. Well, welcome everybody on this beautiful Washington day. Again, let's give it up for Glenn Morgan, who set this up and is a tireless champion for you and your constitutional rights. The right of petition and of the people peaceably to assemble for the common good shall never be abridged. That's Article 1, Section 4 of our state's Constitution. Our state's Constitution is a brilliant document. Immediately after that part comes Section 5, which says every person may freely speak, write, and publish on any subject. Our state's Constitution takes some of the points that our nation's Constitution makes and extends them, gives you even greater, clearer, stronger rights than the federal Constitution does. And remember always, in our state's Constitution, the Bill of Rights is Article 1. It comes right at the start of the document. And to me, that's greatly important. Now, why is freedom of speech so important? Why? Because of these fences. It's with speech. It's with words and logic and argument and clarity that we make tyranny fold. It's what we have to do, and we always have to do it. It's a constant battle. Long before these puny gates were put up, grasping would-be tyrants have been using crises and emergencies to grab power for as long as humans have been around. Go back in time. Go back to the classics. In the Roman Empire, the Gracchi brothers staged a fake coup so that they'd have the reason to have armed bodyguards that gave them a small army inside the walls of the city of Rome. And you've heard the term, they've crossed the Rubicon. That means they've gone so far you can't back up. Well, crossing the Rubicon comes from Julius Caesar. He was the general of the Roman army, and in those times there were laws that army couldn't come into the city to prevent a military coup. And under the guise of a supposed emergency, Julius Caesar brought the Roman army into the city of Rome and effectively took control of that country and empire. A little further ahead in time, kept closer to our day, in the 1930s in Germany, they had what was called the Reichstag fire. The Reichstag is their parliament building. And a group started a fire, attacked the building, and there was a great political brouhaha after the fire over who'd caused it. Now, some bad guys said it was anarchists, kind of similar to the Antifa that we have today. But the anarchists said it was the other guys, a gang of right-wingers who eventually took control. But whatever the matter, they used that fire in their parliament building as the excuse to consolidate power and exert control over the people. And the people, well-meaning people, decent people in many cases, went along with it. Why? Because it was an emergency. We have to be careful of these emergencies. It's how tyrants gather power. And our great shield, our great weapon against that grabbing power, well, it isn't a knife and it isn't a gun. Our great power against that tyranny is words, it's speech, it's truth. And we have to be able to speak the truth to combat tyranny. That's our greatest weapon. And the truth is, as we're seeing all around this state, the crisis over COVID-19, which is a real virus, which does cause real sickness, has been overstated. And as even health departments in our counties around the state are saying now, this governor's administration's response to COVID is not based on science, it's not based on fact, and it's not based on equity. It's based on consolidating power. And we must press back against that. So cling to your free speech in the rain, in the sun, wherever. Cling to your free speech. Stand for your right to freely speak, to freely write, and publish on social media and old-fashioned media. Don't stand for those who would take away your voice because they are up to no good. They want to put up fences. They want to restrict your access to your government. They want to limit your freedom and your liberty and your independence. This country and this state were born on resisting that tyranny. It's your legacy. It's your inheritance. Protect it, remember it, and stand strong for your freedom and your liberty in this free state of Washington and this free nation of the United States. God bless you all. Keep talking.
All right. Thank you, Representative Walsh. You see why I enjoy having legislators like that in Olympia. So with the restoration of the liquid sunshine that we have in Washington State, I just wanted to let everybody know we're going to start to wrap this up. Brevity is the soul of wit, and actually brevity would make a lot of our rallies be a little bit more popular if they don't drag on forever. So I just want to, in closing, just give it just a little summary of something I think that we need to pay attention to. I mentioned earlier that we cannot outsource our freedoms to other groups and expect that somehow they're going to represent us and protect us or save us or do what needs to be done to ensure that we don't just lose our freedoms, but that we restore those that are being taken away. Too often, I think we obsess about what happens 3,000 miles away and pay almost no attention to what happens down the street where we live. And yet the truth is, 80% of our lives, if not more, is dramatically affected more significantly by what occurs in, the city of Olympia or in this building behind me in Washington, in the state capitol. What happens in your school district, what happens in your local government matters a lot more. If the city of Olympia decides they're going to defund the police and take away 50% of their law enforcement here, how much is that going to affect you if you live in the city of Olympia? Quite dramatically. If the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. falls in on itself, are you even going to notice? Most of us back here probably won't. It's 3,000 miles away. It doesn't affect our day-to-day lives. But yet, we obsess and we spend a phenomenal amount of time and energy writing and obsessing about what's going on in D.C. and almost no time paying attention to what's happening in our community where we live. And yet that's where our freedoms and our life and the impact on our children and our future is being eroded. And I encourage, as I have now for many years, and I just want to continue this, think about what you can do to make an impact locally. There's a saying that the environmental movement has used for many years. It's very good because it applies to activism. Think globally and act locally. I want to think globally about freedom and liberty, and I want to act locally to implement it. I want to act locally in my city council, in my county commission, in the port, here in Olympia, where we should have more access than what we have now. And I think that that's the important thing to remember, ensuring that we retain our freedom of speech, our freedom of assembly, requires us to be eternally vigilant. You don't always have to dress up like Thomas Paine, which I want to point that out here. Yeah, good job. But it is important that we are willing to stand up and do what we need to do and be wise about it. Work together with other people that you trust. Don't outsource it to somebody else. Find little victories that you can have. Today was a victory. Today was a victory, guys. It really was. But I don't want to go home and just forget about it, right? We're going to be moving forward. You're going to be doing a lot more. And so I just want to encourage everybody. Again, I do have a website, wethegovern.com, if you want to see what's going on there, at least until they decide to take that away. And I still have a YouTube channel, We the Govern, as well. And as of last night, Facebook even restored my Facebook page, which is kind of funny. Yeah, so we know that there's censorship afoot. If I was to say anything else, I would certainly like the Attorney General's office to require all of the people over there to go back to law school and perhaps read the Constitution again, or at least get a daily primer on it. I think we'd be better off. But at this point in time, it takes activities, sometimes small events and activities like this, to remind us of our freedoms and the need to stand up for them. And so for that, I'm going to kind of officially close this out in the nice weather that we do have. Get to know some of the people around you. If they're from communities that you live in, see what other things you can do to have a victory for free speech and freedom, and move that ball forward and fight for that battle in our future.
When's the next one?
Well, right now I'll be posting anything that I'm doing like this online, but I'm going to tell you that rallies are not what change. So it's being active and engaged as activists locally. I think you can make a lot of gains in that process. So with that, guys, thank you so much for coming out today in such wonderful weather. And I want to also thank Doug Basler donated some of this equipment, which we thought might get seized today. So I want to thank him for doing that. Also, a friend of mine donated that generator, recognizing it might be seized. And I want to thank the many attorneys who were eager and lined up to represent me if I got arrested. I would have enjoyed, actually, to be honest, I would have kind of enjoyed writing from a jail cell in Thurston County. That would have been fun. I've been a big critic, and so it'd be kind of fun to write from the inside. So, but for that's not what happened, and this is a victory. And with that, please enjoy the rest of the day, and we will see you next time. So, thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Candy Mercer. I'm running for Olympia City Council as a nonpartisan. I believe Olympia is becoming a dystopia and we need change. I want to see an Olympia that we can be happy with and we can raise our families in. We are working to... Can we do one more? I'm new at this. Oh, it's live. You can see I'm new. I am not in this because I'm a politician. I never thought I'd be running for city council. I would not be running for city council unless the city council was not doing its job right. If they were doing their job right, I would be home embroidering, gardening, listening to music. But they have messed my city up so badly that I am compelled to take this dramatic action. And I am working with others. I'm building a coalition. We are trans-political. We reject the political binary. Going forward, I think the political binary is irrelevant. Both parties are corrupt. And I want to set an example at a hyper-local level of what a coalition of a politically diverse group coming together can do. I think we have a powerful message. I think we have the majority of voters behind us. And I see a path to victory. We are playing to win. If you want more information, you can contact Olympia FTW2021@gmail.com. That's Olympia for the win @gmail.com. Whoops, I screwed up. Sorry about that. That's Olympia FTW2021@gmail.com if you want to be part of our group. We need people of talent to help us.
Great. We need less politicians and more people that are servants.
All the people that I know that are considering running are not politicians, and they're the same place that I am. They have busy lives, but they feel it's their civic duty to step up at this point.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jason. I'm not from there.
All right. Thanks for joining me. It was a great event. We actually had a few people from Antifa and BLM show up, or whatever you want to call them, our local protesters. This was actually a good event for them because it really speaks to their rights too. But thank you for joining me. I don't know if it's streaming good or not. I can't ever see comments. I'm sorry about that. I don't have a moderator right now. And with the system I use, I don't see what you're saying currently. But I look forward to seeing what you did say. Please like, share, consider supporting me. I thank you for the people who've supported me this month. It's been a good month finally. And let me know if there's any events you want me to be at. So that's what I do. I like to come and record what's being said so you can see a whole event, and if you can't make it out to these things. So thank you for your support and have a great day.